Through the show, I've had an opportunity to meet a lot of people, and sometimes important people and rich people, famous people, well accomplished people. And we think, wow, they're so, you know what? They're people. People like you and me. You're going to meet someone who is all of those things. He's just people, and it's an amazing, refreshing conversation. John Parrish Peede, the president of Ashland University, is next on Purpose Under Pressure. The heat is on. Let's get cooking. This is Purpose Under Pressure. It's a podcast about people. People just like you, people just like me, business folks, organizational leaders, trying to get things done on purpose. We wake up in the morning, we swing our legs out of bed, we put our feet on the floor and go. And quite often the pressures rise right about the time you open the door and hit the road. They say, nope, something bad's going to happen today, or no, we're going to throw a left turn here or a curveball there. And what you do when that happens, that's the purpose coming through. Do you stick with it? Do you stand up to it? Or do you crumble just a little bit? And so that's what this show is all about. It's called Purpose Under Pressure. If you're back, thank you. I appreciate your coming back to see what we're up to now. Don't forget to give us a like or a follow or a subscribe. Those are really cool. I love to know that you're out there, and people love to know that you like the show. And the more people we can learn that are watching and bring them back, the better chance we have to kind of change their lives too. So thank you very much for being here, and hope you will tell a friend. Purpose Under Pressure is brought to you by Sandler by the Ruby Group, serving sales professionals nationwide from their Akron and Columbus, Ohio locations. They're also in Jacksonville, Florida. They provide sales training, business growth strategies. If you are a boss or a leader or a sales manager or director, you know your team has to perform at the very highest level, but it also should matter to you how they perform. How did they close that deal? Which clients did they bring in? Was it on purpose? Because if it's not, if it's just a bunch, then something's not right. And that's what Sandler by the Ruby Group does try to focus on. They will help you grow, but you'll grow on purpose, and it'll do you good if you give them a call. You can check them out online at therubygroup.sandler.com. I am excited to introduce to you today our guest. Our guest is John Parrish Peede. He's the president of Ashland University. He's also the former chairman of the National Endowment for the Humanities. I'm an AU graduate, and I'm proud to welcome John Peede to the show. Welcome to Purpose Under Pressure.
Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure, Brian. Glad to be with you.
Really glad you're here. I know that Ashland University is extremely important to Ashland, and I think most local education higher outlets are extremely important to their hometowns, and many places have them. And so it's good what you do. And I know you're not just here to churn out kids. I know you're here to turn things on, and I really do appreciate the efforts you're making here.
Thank you. We have a wonderful team, and what I love is a community. And I think sometimes we forget that in higher ed, that at the end of the day, we're creating character in our students. We're awakening what's already in them, and we only do that and do that well if we are indeed a community at heart.
And this is a community. I'm here in Ashland, and we thrive when you thrive when we thrive, and it's very important that we all grow together. I know it's not easy in higher education, but I know that Ashland University is going to make things happen. I'm interested. Let's start. Why are you here? What brings you here? What's your purpose for being here? What's good with you and with Ashland University right now? Let's start there.
Well, my goodness, I could spend all your the time about the university. I can say this, and we'll probably work backwards to how purpose in my life. I was always from a young person, driven and creative. I would as a little boy draw, and then and play sports, write poetry, and it didn't seem odd to me that you would do all these things together. And certainly curiosity of the mind was important in my family, and I came to Ashland unexpectedly. So for 13 years in the federal government, I funded museums, libraries, universities. I think I awarded at least $10 million to more than a dozen universities and museums in the state of Ohio, and had traveled to 43 states to give grants in person in a lot of nations. And at the end of my federal appointment, I usually had a White House appointment. Um, I knew that I would run something large, ideally complex, whether that's a museum or a university or some kind of think tank. Uh, What I didn't know is that it would be Ashland University
Mm.
and Ashland Theological Seminary. And even more so, I didn't know that I would have a calling, the first calling of my life. I didn't know if I was fully the spiritual man I needed to be to have a calling. But at a point of 30 years of federal and university service, here I am with a calling.
So I want to find out what that calling is, but I'm just as, if not more, interested to that moment in your life. You knew your federal government role was ending. You weren't sure you had a calling. You'd probably not heard of, perhaps at Ashland University. I'm making assumptions here.
Sure.
Was there a moment when there was a fear? John, we don't think of presidents of universities having fear. You guys have it all figured out, right? But there might have been a moment where things were a little tough.
um, I've been blessed that fear, with a few moments of my life, fear hasn't really been an element of my life, but anxiety, worry, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah, yeah.
And most of my government service was White House appointments. So you have the high of running a federal agency. I was confirmed by the U.S. Senate in my 40s to run a federal agency. Um, I was unanimously confirmed under President Trump. So I had been appointed previously by George Bush 43. President Obama had actually asked me to stay, even though I was appointed by the other party. Went to the University of Virginia and came back when President Trump asked me to. And I was very proud that I was unanimously confirmed by the U.S. Senate. So no, not a single senator voted against me, which is another way of saying I'm a middle child. um,
Little
but
something for everybody there, right?
that's
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. But that does mean at the end of an appointment, it usually ends on the day of the inauguration.
Okay.
So there are, just as everybody coming into office is celebrating, the rest of us are boxing up our possessions and leaving.
Yeah.
And so when I left the chairmanship of the National Endowment for the Humanities in January of as President Biden came in, Ashland was not on my radar. I
Yeah.
had spoken here before. I had been invited as a visiting writer in 2016, so I had been on campus. That same summer, I think I was a visiting writer at Miami, of Ohio too. So I've been in and out of the state a good bit, and I thought I would. My wife and I moved back to my native Mississippi. I thought, I'll write a book, I'll consult. And I did that. I did some First Amendment type projects in London. I worked on a landmine project in Vietnam with a museum. Interesting consulting, and I taught. I taught at a historically Black university in Mississippi as their visiting writer, and I was waiting for what the next step was.
Yeah. Those things, although very well accomplished and important, weren't your calling.
No, they weren't, and what I'll work backwards to say, my career had been, I've been very fortunate and great mentors. That sometimes people saw things in me that I didn't yet see in myself, or frankly didn't yet possess, to be even more candid, and they
Yeah.
let me develop it on the job. Um, and we move up sometimes in our career through good fortune, good leadership, sometimes just ambition, and we can do that and have a Christian life and other things. It's not the same as a calling. And so I
Mm.
was proud of those years, but and those were secular roles that I might have done some things very much to support institutions of faith, funding the Martin Luther King papers, or the C.S. Lewis papers, placement at library, rather, at Wheaton College. So
Hmm.
I did things in my workplace that were of a spiritual nature. It's not the same as a calling. And my
Okay.
wife, who is a minister and has such a deep spiritual life, she's the one. She's the one. And in a hot February in Mississippi, said, "Everything you tell me you want is right here in this Ashland uh, job opportunity."
Wow.
And I'll add only one brief piece as we think about how purpose works. And I thought that my hesitancy about applying was when you have something that you hope so deeply in yourself, that you prayed about in yourself, you're so worried that it won't happen for you and the heartbreak of that. And then the other part is I thought if I applied, I'm quite likely to get this. And if I do, it is presumably the last career act of my life.
Wow, that is pressure.
And that was a stunning thing to face. You can walk away from a job. One should pause greatly before walking away from a calling.
And so when your wife said that to you and when you opened your eyes to this and decided to make that leap, what was it about, because you had not done a leading a higher education before. What was it that said, look, this isn't what I've done before. This is my calling and this is how I know I'm qualified to do it. What was that bridge like?
And I think it was looking back at my career and laying, if you will, a grid over to explain it to a search committee. So, Ashland, our board, our community.
Yes.
So, we're part of the Brotherhood Church. So, you want to talk about your spiritual commitments. We have a lot of CPAs that are graduates. We have a school of education at the doctorate level, MBA program. We have a school of nursing. And of course, undergraduate is the root of our residential undergraduate experience. And we have incarcerated students in 14 states through online education.
It's an amazing program.
And thank you. And so if I were on that board and that hiring committee, I'm thinking, boy, I better have somebody who's already been a president. And I'm in the peculiar uh, position. I'm 55 years old, so been working professionally for at least 30 years. I've never held the same job twice ever.
Okay.
So some 6 formative times I've gone before groups over 30 years and said, I believe I have enough transferable skills or can learn on the job such to do this. And I tried to make that case to the board and to the committee. And the National Endowment for the Humanities is a larger budget. The university budget's about $100 million. The federal agency, my last year with extra COVID money, was $273 million. We might have had $400 million in and out of there.
Mm-hmm.
It's complicated. You'd meet in the morning with the White House and the Senate, and if we're meeting with the Trump White House in the morning and Schumer in the afternoon, these were not aligned parties, I think it's fair to say. And so
That's fair.
You learn if you treat everyone with respect, if you're transparent to both, if you have a set of values and stick to them and articulate them, it matters. And so that's a transferable skill. What I did realize about myself, and only in retrospect, every one of these jobs, from my first job as a university press book editor to a magazine publisher, a grant maker, I was a storyteller. This is probably I'm sure if we're doing the interview of your life, you are doing what I do. The culture of being a book editor was my mindset.
Mm-hmm.
I exist in the world to help understand somebody else's story and get it to the audience. And now I'm telling the story of this beautiful, transformative university.
Mm-hmm.
It's not my life story to tell. It's the universities, the alums, the professors, and the students' story to tell.
Yeah.
And as a book editor, sometimes, I would accept a professor's manuscript for publication and I would put through 2,000 changes. And they would think, oh, if you thought it was that bad, why did you even accept it? And I said, no, I think there's just something underneath here you haven't quite gotten to yet.
Yeah.
And it's my job to help you get there. And it's my job to share your story. So I really want to commend the board and the search committee because an editor is an uncommon practice. and I ran a federal agency that only 13 people have ever run. So it's hard to say that I know exactly what that job is.
Yeah.
Uh, they know what a dean is and a provost is and president is.
Hmm.
And I think the idea that we're seeing across the country in higher ed, that these presidencies are such complex business endeavors
Yes.
that you're going to want somebody that has a broad range of experiences and in all candor, the ability to work through complicated political matters with an academic background. That's probably the resume will increasingly see selected.
Yeah, yeah, and I know that the Ashland University and almost any organization where a new CEO comes in, there are already waves in place. The churning is already taking place, and it's difficult. And so I'm interested. We talk about calling still. If it's truly your calling, let's pretend that it's like the skies open up and the sun lines down and everything's perfect from then on. Because why would it not be? And yet I can't imagine it's that way. It's still your calling. But what's the difficult things? Maybe the most difficult thing that you've had to adjust to, or that you've accomplished, hurdled, since you came to Ashland University.
Well, I think the biggest thing I would note is because of the FAFSA, for those who don't have school age children, that's essentially the federal government's instrument where a family reports their level of financial need. And without the successful completion of that, you cannot receive student loans and some institutional funding. And the federal government was so behind with
Mm,
that document that it really, really impacted, particularly the student profile we have.
really?
If you're Harvard or Stanford and you have a junior and they receive $50,000 in student loans the last 2 years, or student financial aid rather, you can go ahead and give it to them. If the number ends up being wrong, they can absorb the loss. We try to keep our tuition at a much more manageable price than that. So we really need to understand what the family's finances are so we can put together the best package.
Hmm.
And by the time I started interviewing in February, it was well in the papers that the FAFSA uh, problems were going on at the Department of Education, but it was never understood how badly that would be bungled. There's not really a kind way to put it. It was, as the Department of Education admits itself, a colossal technical failure,
Wow.
and such that they brought in outside individuals to take it over. That had a tremendous financial impact on the university. So the biggest challenge was to arrive and say to our team that I was just getting to know, we will get through this. And by the way, we will get through this in a methodical way, not by the easy route of saying, regretfully, we're going to eliminate 30 positions or 50 positions. These were the dollar amounts we were looking at.
Mm,
And turning to the board and saying, we're going to have to work through a deficit this year. They were already projecting a deficit for next year, and I said, and I'm still saying there'll be a deficit next year and break even in 2027. And then to pivot out of that meeting and say to our advancement team, our fundraisers, who I had not yet met, and to change, I'll use the idea of purpose, to change the purpose within the purpose.
mm,
So we have a lot of people that have had great success here in Ohio through farming, through gas and oil, and they might be making estate plans that these are things that will happen in 20 or 30 years, uh, that they will have transfer gifts as part of their estates. Going to somebody who's already made that remarkable commitment and saying, sir, ma'am, I need to know if you could also give this year
mm,
uh, in a manner that you weren't previously being asked. It was always the same purpose of our advancement team, which is to secure funds such that we could retain a wonderful faculty members and that we could recruit great students. And now saying our purpose is focusing on annual giving,
mm,
which can often be the hardest part, right?
mhm.
And what I can say is the team responded so remarkably well. I think they saw in one another skills that maybe they had not realized. And one of my jobs is to help say to them, it's inside you. I see it. I believe in it. Um, we can do this together. And so that was the great challenge, an outside force impacting our enrollment and trying to get an entire team, a skilled team, to pivot to essentially a new task.
And that's a hallmark of a great leader. You don't need me to tell you that. Not every leader has that ability to bring the best out of his or her people. And we can say we do it, but it's getting it done is a whole different story. So I'm glad you're actually seeing the fruits of those efforts. I want to talk a little bit about the future of higher education as we move forward. But I'm interested if now is a good time. I've got you here, so I have to
Yeah,
ask. Right now, it's 2025, and the world is changing at the government level, and Elon Musk and Donald Trump, and there's Doge, and there's so you have had a unique experience here, and you have been responsible for spending or allocating dollars, millions of dollars at the government level. You're also at the university where you receive.
yeah.
What's going on? Is it as bad as we see? Did you see evidence of fraud at the level? What can we do, as Americans or as people, to kind of ride the ship and see it? No one wants to waste a dollar, and how
Sure,
can we work on that?
sure. So I spent 13 years in federal service at the National Endowment for the Arts and National Endowment for the Humanities, and very young in my college years at the Veterans Administration, Veterans Affairs. I never personally witnessed in my two agencies that I was of a leadership position, never witnessed fraud. And somebody might agree or disagree about a grant, but I never witnessed waste.
Right.
I will tell you, for 7 years, though, I in my longest federal appointment across two administrations, two political parties. For 7 years, I worked with U.S. troops, helping them therapeutically process the war experience. There was an Oscar-nominated film that was part of that, and a New York Times bestselling book that was part of that, called Operation Homecoming.
Okay.
So I was in Afghanistan, about 30 military bases over 7 years. Uh, the Department of Defense's budget has an extraordinary amount of waste in it.
Mm,
Uh, I'm a deeply patriotic person, love my nation,
mm.
uh, watched young men and women make, in some cases, the ultimate sacrifice. I did not witness it in person. I want to make sure that precision of my wording there. But we would edit books of their stories, and between the hardback printing and the paperback, and the later paperback contributors were now deceased. So, my utmost respect, and yet at the top of the Pentagon, do we need a thorough accounting for how those tax dollars are spent? Categorically, we do. And so I'm going to say, as somebody that works in higher ed and serves in federal government, um, I don't want waste in my organization, and I don't want it in my federal government. And some actions are overdue, and some of us are certainly having to work through the manner in which that waste and possibly fraud is being dealt with. So
Yep.
I do carefully look at federal grants we have, or Ohio grants that are fully federally funded. And we have to think about what happens if the funds simply don't come through. And we don't have the same pressure that Johns Hopkins University, for example, in Maryland, has just laid off 2,200 employees. And the reason they say laid off is because of union rules. They can't terminate them originally. Now, if you have 2,200 people working on federal grants, you're essentially running a federal agency within a university almost, and
Yes.
that gives you a sense of their R&D, their research and development. Ashland isn't a research and development R1 university, so we're less impacted um, than some of the Stanfords, the Caltechs, the MITs, even less impacted than, say, Ohio State. Um, we have been fortunate that we've been largely donor supported, and again, we run a lean budget,
Mhm.
and we try to keep our tuition reasonable through that.
And let's and thank you for sharing that. I know it's not easy. I can't imagine it's easy to talk about politics and this is right, that's wrong. I don't think anybody wants to even do that anymore, which is maybe another topic for another day,
Mm.
because we need to discuss these things. But I appreciate your vulnerability and sharing some of your thoughts there. Real quickly, what was it like when Donald Trump called the second time and said, "Hey, come back"?
Everyone in the organization needs to know how to sell. Sales is the strength of any company. Whether or not you're in marketing, operations, or even finance, everyone has a strong shared accountability towards driving top-line revenue. Whether or not you're client-facing or talking over the phone, you're able to build a stronger level of rapport with the clients. Everyone in the organization shares that responsibility to know how to sell.
Real quickly, what was it like when Donald Trump called the second time and said, "Hey, come back"?
So when in the Bush years, I was a 30-year-old learning from these great leaders. I was under probably arguably the greatest leader in the history of the National Endowment for the Arts, the writer and poet and businessman Dana Gioia. And so when President Trump asked me to come back for a second time to run a federal agency, that was a great surprise and honor. And I am going to say I'm staying at Ashland, not re-entering federal service for, I guess it would be the fourth time. But I have said, I will be honest, I've advocated for our professors and our alums for serving in federal roles and boards and commissions. And so I do, let's say I am in frequent contact with Washington, D.C.,
Yeah.
and back to talk with political leadership there.
Well, I think I think it's part of your calling. I can tell by, I think it's part of who you are. And I think it's good that you're opening and keeping those doors open. I want to switch back to higher education a little bit. I want to talk about the future. I don't always like to steer people, but I know the challenges in the future for higher education involve finances, but they also involve the students.
Mhm.
Where should they go to school? Why should they go to school? Should they go to school? And that impacts the success on your enrollment and of your university. And so what are the challenges that you have to lead through to overcome to make sure the students get the very best, but that also Ashland University continues to grow? Is that a fair question?
An excellent question. And I'll tell you, and in many ways, even the title of your podcast comes into it, because we are making a conscious decision at Ashland, and I'll say I am as president, to pursue our future in a way that, in all candor, does increase pressure on us financially, emotionally, everything. We're doing it because we believe it's our purpose to do it. We believe it's aligned to our roots since 1878. We'll be coming up on 150th anniversary. What do I mean by that? Let's talk about, and I think Ohio audience in particular will get this, but even your listeners outside of Ohio will know these two institutions. And so I'm going to identify two institutions by their larger identity, knowing that there's nuances within that. If you and I were in charge of recruiting students to, say, come to Oberlin University in Ohio,
Mhm.
they're very upfront that social justice is a real part of their identity. Students and faculty are generally politically progressive. And so that can be very clarifying if you're a guidance counselor, the steer students that want that environment to go there. And of course, there'll be other types, there. In our same athletic league, there's Hillsdale in Michigan. Hillsdale is politically conservative. Their faculty is their president's a leading cultural figure of conservatism. Um, and we have other institutions that are very Christian faith-based. You have to sign a statement of faith to even be allowed to matriculate to the university. And then here's Ashland.
Hmm.
We're trying to do something different. Now, I, as president, sign a statement of our Christian faith, and I proudly do so. But if you're agnostic, you're welcome here. If you're Hindu, you're welcome
That's
here.
right.
If you go to our chapel services on campus, as you and I have here, wonderful. If you stay in your dorm, that is your right. And so we're trying to say that we believe America is, I'm still going to use the word I was, there's this melting pot, right? And then the fullness of your life, you're going to meet people and work with people of all different political views and religious views and cultural backgrounds. So we want the college to be that. I can tell you that is a harder way to recruit. We are trying this third way. And that means some students are going to say, oh, I want more people of my type.
Yeah, that's right.
Well,
The brand comes in.
so I'm going to go there. I can tell you every once in a while when I'm looking at the pressure of trying to recruit with the profile we have, then I have a night like the election night, the presidential election night. So I went over to our building where Ashbrook Center. It is I would say, politically conservative group that was founded. Reagan opened up the first opening of the Ashbrook Center, which is a separate 501c3 on our campus. Many of our professors teach there, our political scientists and our historians. Margaret Thatcher and others have spoken there. And yet I meet these wonderfully well-rounded students, and they just want to read works of history and really have debates. And they're not a monolithic group. So on the election night, they had pizza, and the college Republicans and the college Democrats on campus sponsored it together. They're drawing the map. Obviously, one party maybe felt better about dealing with coloring in the states that night, but it was wonderful. And then you turn on cable television, they say, oh, we're so divided, and people are self-selecting. I don't want to live in a world where all my friends think just like me. All the neighbors that I share meals with are just like me. I want to live in America. And so I think we're doing something great here. Is it tough sledding? Yes. I don't think anything, I think of Teddy Roosevelt's The Man in the Arena. We are called to be everything we can be. We should associate ourselves with the hard path.
Absolutely.
And that is what we're trying to do in the state of higher ed. And it will be increasingly hard to do that. And the last thing I'll say is we are also making one other quite hard decision. We are saying we're going to invest all the money it takes to be a residential collegiate experience. All the costs of the buildings and the land and the library. That, yes, of course, we have online classes for the graduate classes, online degrees, so that teachers all over the country can study with us, for example. But there are a lot of places that are saying that's not sustainable, that you need professors just sitting in their house, getting paid as adjuncts, teaching these classes online. And one of my absolute favorite people on our campus and our Dean Sean Orr of our non-traditional learning, she's wonderful about online coursework, that modality, workplace development. We do an incredible amount of certificates, and others. But at our heart, for the undergraduate, we believe in the 4 years of a melting pot of really decent people debating ideas together. It's the right path, and it's the hard path.
It's the hard path because it's the deep path. I'll share an analogy, a story of my own life. A few years ago, 10, 15, however many, I'm terrible with time, but I spent some time in China, and we were in the big city of Shanghai. And this was just after the Olympics had come, I believe. And we walked through the streets of Shanghai, and it's beautiful. Like, it's lights and cameras and high tech, and everything's amazing on the surface. If you took a few steps down the alley into the back of the buildings, it was like a movie set. There was nothing there. It was poor. It was um, distressed and beat up, and it wasn't what it looked like on the front. And I
Right.
think it's easy to put a facade on things and to promote the
Right.
facade because people want that,
Right.
but they've got to have the true experience inside, the deep experience to really make it count. And I think you're doing that, and that's good.
Well, I really like the way you painted that because it makes it very real. Um, and and I think it is your takeaway. Tell me about the difference of what you perceived it to be, what was the reality, because I think that's the other responsibility we have as leaders, is to help people understand that it there's perception and reality should be quite close together.
Yeah, because if was that a question for me?
Yeah. Yes.
Because if so many people, I think the largest percentage of people will just keep walking down that street and they won't take a look down the end. And so putting
Yes.
up that facade will make a few dollars or will make the
Yeah.
right impression on the masses. But I don't think Ashland University is there for the masses. I think it's there for a small group or it's not the masses. It's a lot of people. It's not everyone. And so by doing it right, so I mean, people like me that wanted to see what's really here,
Mhm.
it changed the way I viewed that city and that country, and always will. Some other people that didn't look down the alley won't have the same perspective of me. It doesn't mean they're wrong. It just means they didn't look quite as deep. And so I know, based on what you're telling me, I know that when I walk the streets in Ashland and walk the areas, and I see, my buddy Rick, I know he's got the nice ferns up, and the hostas look great, and the flowers look good, but I know it's deeper than that, and that's really important to me. And I'm glad you're paying attention.
Well, thanks. And what you said, Rick Ewing, his team, the whole team's wonderful, and that is for us an outward manifestation that we are trying to teach the students about what William Faulkner called the old verities, right? The old truths.
Mm,
And so that's why we're still reading books from 2,000 years ago and even older, right? That's why we're trying to have continuity with our cultural past, and 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 that's not one past, obviously,
yep.
but there is when you talked about China, on the one hand, I remember their Olympic ceremony. It was
Hmm.
so
Oh
extraordinary
yeah,
and remarkable and envious. And yet I also remember they had to tear down some of the most historic parts
that's right.
of the city to make way for that. And I
That's right.
think that's a great metaphor in higher ed, is that you can be forward leaning, but you have to be rooted.
Yes, sir.
Um, uh, I love nature and I love trees and flowers, and we don't go back to national parks to see nature that is unrooted, because we call that a wasteland.
That's right. That's right. My last question for you, as we kind of wrap up, you talk about calling. We get back to that and purpose, and you're doing what you're called to do. Calling doesn't always mean it's happy work. Are you happy? Are you glad you're here at Ashland University?
I'm content, and I don't substitute contentment for happiness so much, but happiness, so much of the world can penetrate on it.
Mm,
Contentment, I have more ownership of. Contentment is about me looking at defining it. So defining what I'm gonna prioritize. So today I'm gonna meet about budget matters, and I need to raise more money than I've raised so far. My contentment comes because today I walked outside and we're having kind of free coffee for the students, and they can either tweet that it's the day of giving today, as it is,
yeah.
or they can write a note, dear donor. They don't quite know who they're writing, and yes, they need to write a little card. And people are saying some really special things.
Mm,
I think we underestimate the youth of America and those international students that have come here. I think they have great generosity in their hearts, and we need to do a better job as an older generation of giving them outlets for it to come forward. So I might spend 4 hours today in the budget. I spent 10 minutes out there with the students, just looking at them write the cards.
Hmm.
My contentment resides in them.
There. Yeah, absolutely. I don't think you're hard to find, and I know Ashland University is not hard to find, but I like to give my guests an opportunity to promote things. And if someone needed to reach out to talk to you or to learn more about Ashland University, what would be the best way to do that?
Oh, sure. Well, we answer emails. The email that doesn't always come directly to me, and that's frankly so it can get answered more quickly or get to the top of my inbox. But I can be communicated with at president@ashland.edu. People can call us. Our phone numbers on the website. People can reach out across social media. I'm present in my personal and professional capacity, on a couple of social media platforms. And tell us what we're doing well. That's great, but also tell us ways we can improve. I don't know any uh, lasting organization that isn't in a constant state of improvement.
John, well, folks, as we wrap up, I'll tell you this. I'm an Ashland University, I'm an Ashland Eagle graduate. Back in 1988, I received my diploma. I'm not sure I earned it, but they gave me one anyway. I paid for it, right? And it's led to great things. And so this is not a commercial for Ashland University, but I highly suggest if you've got kids or you're looking for an MBA or something of that sort, education wise, they're a great school. And that's all I'll say about that. I do want to say this, John and I, you and I haven't talked. We've met, and
Yes.
we briefly shook hands at church one day. But I will say this is the first time I've talked with you, and I will let everyone know that if you want to know about whether is John the real deal, I can tell he is. And I think, John, I know a lot about Ashland. I know a lot more about Ashland than I know about you.
Mm.
I can tell now that I think you're good for Ashland. And I have a feeling Ashland might be good for you. I sense a blue collar, down to earth approach that is very highly skilled, able to take care of the important things, which leading Ashland University is, but also able to be a part of our community and to assimilate and to understand and have empathy. And I'm really looking forward to seeing the things that you do at Ashland University.
Oh, well, thank you. Those really kind words, and I appreciate you reaching out to me, Ron, from church and involve me with this. And I say to everybody, meet my wife first, meet Nancy, and my goodness, if I ever met somebody that had purpose in her life, I'll just say quickly, she's an ordained minister. Nancy's older than I am. She's retired now, but about 100 women were ordained in the 20th century as Southern Baptists. And so she had churches. She was called by God. She had a business degree, but she was called by God to be a minister. And she couldn't find churches in the South, even with her ordination at the Southern Baptist, rather her degree at the Southern Baptist Seminary. So those were closed doors. But Harvard University asked her to be the chaplain over all Southern Baptists. So she was ordained in Boston. And she had a purpose from the time I ever met her, and I was always finding mine. That might be one of my advice. If find somebody who has it more together than you do, and I did, and 30 years later, we're still quite happy we did so.
Good.
And so Nancy and I both have been welcomed so much by the community, and that's been quite special.
That's good, and that's really important. And I'll have to talk with Nancy because I'm very interested. I didn't know until fairly recently, within the last couple of years, that in many churches, women aren't allowed. It's not allowed for them to speak. The people will walk out if, and I know I'm not trying to be against any religion. Whatever you think is fine, but I just didn't know it, and I was really surprised by that.
Yeah, so she completed her MDiv at Southern Seminary, and that's Southern Baptist Seminary. And then later, when she was at Harvard, she went to study with the Jesuits. So she actually was pursuing degrees with two groups that said, she can't be in the pulpit as a minister.
Right.
And her instruction to me, her takeaway was sometimes you leave organizations, right, because a difference in your values or perspective. Sometimes you stay within them, hoping that your presence will be a positive influence.
Absolutely.
And we've had those conversations as I've gone in and out of presidential appointments.
Boy, I bet. John, you've lived and will live and will continue to live an amazing and well-led life. So my best to you, and I wish you nothing but the best here at Ashland University.
Oh, well, thank you. This has been an absolute pleasure, and thank you for the time.
Thank you. That's John Parrish Peede. He's the new president of Ashland University. If you see him around town, say hello and good luck. I know he'll appreciate that. And folks, I just really do appreciate John being a part of this show. And he's a guest on Purpose Under Pressure. It's brought to you by Sandler by the Ruby Group, where sellers are under pressure to perform. We know that Sandler will do everything they can to help you to succeed, not just in succession, but on purpose. You're going to find all past episodes of Purpose Under Pressure at brianmediastrategies.com/podcast and wherever you stream your favorite shows. We do this every week, and we will see you again next time on Purpose.